So Simon, last time we talked yesterday, you talked. This is your fourth outing with Tom Cruise.
It is.
What is it that you learned from him on this go around on Fallout?
Don't jump across a large gap in a building and put your foot out and hit the building with the foot as you land. That was the big lesson I took away.
Me too. Now, with the Mission Impossible franchise, it's always evolving and it's staying at the cusp of action films.
Yeah.
What is it about the Mission Impossible franchise that makes it so great? Great action films.
I think because of the authenticity of what you're seeing, in this day and age when we can render anything on the screen, and we do, in marvelous ways, create extraordinary worlds and have human beings do things that they could never do, CG is a brilliant tool, but there is something to be said for keeping it real.
Right.
And Tom is at pains, literally, to make sure that the audience know that what he's doing on the screen, he did in real life. And when you do watch that, there's more of a sense of kind of urgency and tension and excitement because you know it's real. When you see something which is kind of like fake, you don't have to suspend your disbelief. You suspend your disbelief willingly a little bit. With this, you don't have to so much. So you kind of end up being utterly perplexed at how anyone allows him to do it, because it obviously puts us all in jeopardy. Because if he was to cop it, we didn't have a job.
Mission Impossible's been around for the last 22 years. What does it mean to join the franchise? And how are they keep making these films so relevant to now and keeping up with the times of film?
Well, good question. I mean, to stay relevant, I think you have to continually reinvent, to push the bar, to broaden the parameters of what's possible. I mean, in this one, the bar certainly has been raised. Watch it, and I'm sure you'll agree. It's bigger, better, badder, and.
I mean, Chris McHugh has a great eye for action. What did you learn from Chris on this film?
What I learned from Chris is a real man. He's got an ear if you want to talk. He's sometimes presents you with very little script, which can be slightly daunting for some actors, but he also instills you with a huge amount of trust, which counteracts that lack of script at times. So it's like it becomes a really collaborative thing, and that extends also to Tom. It's not just Chris. Between the two, they're amazing to work with.
Speaking of Tom, he's one of the biggest stars in the world, obviously. I'm pretty sure he was super cool and down to earth on this film. What did you learn from him?
What didn't I learn from him is the answer, really. I mean, it was acting 101 in a sense. He was incredibly focused, incredibly diligent with everything, every shot, every blade of hair. He's like, okay, well, everything has to be super sharp, and the camera won't roll until it is. And you realise how much goes into the preparation of these films, and what makes it what it is, So.
Final question. It sounds like obviously you have an accent. 007. Who wins in a fight, Ethan Hawke or 007? Ethan Hunt or 007? Sorry.
Ethan Hunt or 007. Which 007? Is a movable feast. Look, Ethan Hunt's a pretty badass dude, man. I don't know what to say. James Bond's also pretty badass, but I don't know.
So first question I have for you is there anything, because we talked about the helicopter scene, which was mind-blowing. Was there anything in this movie that you wanted to do that you almost just didn't make it for time or whatever, just couldn't get it in there?
There's something we did do, and we had to cut it out of the movie.
Really?
Yeah, we did a stunt inside the Grand Palais. After they arrive on the rooftop, they had to get down to the ground, and we created this very complicated wire gag where Henry and Tom swung off of a cable, which you see in one of the first trailers. And we had so many stunts in the movie. This is the first time I've made a movie where the test audience has said there's just too much action in the movie. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, next question is, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Tom convinced you to come back for a second Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
If Tom talked to you again, would you come back for a third?
I could only answer that question after a really long nap.
Right off the bat, first question, or first thing I got to say is that, man, this franchise has been around 22 years, and it keeps evolving with films. It keeps going, it keeps on the pace that the films do. What is it about Mission Impossible that keeps it so relevant and making it one of the best action franchises of all time?
Well, I think the films keep trying to up the last one. So, there's always a moment in the beginning where how are we going to outdo the last film? And I think audiences have responded to that. They've said, you know what, that's better, or at least as good as the last one. But that challenge is out there every time. And also, Tom is very strict in terms of trying to maintain the quality. We're not trying to dilute it. We're not trying to do something less. We try to do everything bigger and better than, and the basis of that is story. I think ultimately everybody talked about the action, but if you don't have a story that people are engaged in, the action just falls flat. So, really focusing on the story and making every film for a fresh audience, treating it like it's the first time that you've seen the film, or the audience doesn't have to have seen the previous films to enjoy this one. That's the idea.
Now, I talked to Chris McHugh and Tom about this. That helicopter scene blew my mind. Now, when you sit down and you read the script, and Chris, I'm sure he's out there with his ideas, is there anything that you say to yourself, how are we going to do this?
Everything. Although reading the script isn't something that happens so early on, because it's very organic in terms of making the film. I think every day we go out and something is decided that you have a moment where you have to pause and say, how are we going to do that? But that's what the team does. I mean, just as there's an IMF team, there's a team behind the camera that is putting together all of the logistics, all the plans to try to do all this stuff safely and, and complete the vision.
Sure. I mean, Chris was saying that there was a mad rush to get this film out. It was almost like art imitating life, with Mission Impossible almost just being finished in time. Is that true?
It's weird that happens every time. We had so much time to make the movie, and then Tom got injured, and suddenly the release date was just, was just closer and closer and closer, and suddenly, the paint is still wet.
Sure. And last question, this is obviously, Chris is the first director to ever come back to a Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and do you think that he could come back for a third Mission Impossible?
I can't answer that, only Chris can. I think the reason that it came about is that the relationship between him and Tom was very strong, and everybody was very happy with the process in the last film. And I think Chris, his approach was, I'm going to direct this movie like, stylistically, I'm a new director. I don't want it to look like the last one. I don't want it to feel like the last one. And we did everything we could to kind of change this one up and not make it. So it's there are a lot of story plot moments that are connected to Rogue Nation, but stylistically, it's a completely different film.
I know that you're huge into video games, and Mission Impossible just feels like a video game. So how much was this playing out almost like a fantasy for you?
Yeah, it was kind of like that. I hadn't thought of it that way. It was kind of like being in a video game, especially that helicopter sequence at the end. It's literally like the games I play. I got to be kind of a badass, but it was way colder. Normally you're sitting at home, nice comfy chair. This was really genuinely cold. And that's something I now think of when I'm playing games. I'm like, he'd bleed out, he'd be dead of the cold before then.
I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
Last question is, there's been a huge outpour from DC fans. They want to see the Snyder Cut. Do you want to see that version for the fans? At all? I don't even know if it exists.
I honestly have no idea if it exists.
Same.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I can't wait for you to suit up again, but this is movie incredible. Thank you
very much.
Take care.